Not if they want to see my face.
Oh, right.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right. I mentioned that I had a lot of different animals growing up. And when I was a young adult, first living on my own, I decided it was time to have the two-legged pet. And no, adoptive dad, I'm not talking about children, though I do have that pet now too, but I'm talking about birds. And this is a little story about 3 cockatiels that I had and how they all got their names. And a lot of times when I tell the story, I like to have my guitar with me and it has a little sing-along chorus. I'm just going to sing it at the beginning so I don't take up too much time with this story, but it goes, I've got birds in my living room, birds inside my bed, running across the countertops and climbing on my head. I've got feathers in my dinner, all the paint chewed off my doors, seed across the rug, and you know what stuck to the floors. Thank you very much for that one person clapping. I really appreciate that. You saved my sense of self-esteem, and I really deeply appreciate that. So I went out and I got my first bird. It was a sweet little cockatiel, a little gray. And my approach to naming pets is to bring them home and let some kind of an event happen or some kind of personality to emerge before I decide what their names are going to be. So I brought her home, and when you first get a lot of birds at pet stores, their primary flight feathers have been clipped. And so they can ease themselves to the floor, but they can't fly, so the trajectory is kind of like shh. And this bird would fly off her cage and onto the floor, and then she'd click around on the floor. I had hardwood floors in my apartment, just like in this room here. And she'd go tick, 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 you know, from room to room. She looked like a little wind-up toy. Her little toenails would go on the hardwood floor. Tick, 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 tick. So sometimes I would say silly things like, well, here comes the big bird on campus. Or here comes Joe Toenails, and sometimes I'd get a little sillier and say, here comes Toe Joe Nails. And then one day, I had this blinding inspiration of what I needed to name her. Joe Toenails, Toe Joe Nails, Tojo. Well, if you know your history, Tojo was the name of the Japanese general who was responsible for bombing Pearl Harbor. And when my Tojo's primary flight feathers grew back in and she was able to fly, bombing pretty well decides what she did to my apartment. Birds are essentially social animals, and I felt guilty leaving Tojo home alone when I went off to work, so I got a second bird, a companion bird, to keep Tojo company. And I brought the bird home, and I waited for an event, and I waited for some kind of personality to emerge. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I discovered that I had picked up a bird that had no personality whatsoever. And one day I had another flash of inspiration. I was going to name the bird Bwana. Now my connection with the word Bwana is like those old African movies, The Great White Hunter, you know, and the porters call him Bwana, boss. This bird wasn't the boss, definitely wasn't the case. Bwana, in my mind, was an acronym for bird without a name. Bwana. More time passed. I had no intention of getting another bird, but I like to go into pet stores and look at them, interact with them if they were friendly. And I was walking by a cage with a cockatiel in it one day, and this cockatiel came up to the front, and he went back and forth on the bar, right at the front of the cage. And I noticed when other people walked by, the bird didn't do that. I thought, huh. So I had a friend with me. I said, will you go over there? And she went over, and when she did, the bird kind of moved over to the middle of the cage. It was kind of like, and I went back, and the bird came over, and he's all pacing back and forth. And so I decided, you know, I've gone in and picked out many pets in pet stores, but this was the first one that picked out me. I brought it home, and it turned out to be the best, worst pet I'd ever had in my life. He was a little bit aggressive, when the breeding mojo was upon him. And he would follow me around the house, land on my shoulder, on my head. One day he did that little thing, pacing back and forth on the curtain rod of the shower, and I realized he wanted to come in with me. I put out my finger, he flew down, and from that day forward, while my other birds bathed in bowls of water on top of their cage, he came under the water with me in the shower. And unlike my other birds that sort of have a Japanese and African extraction name, I decided to go a little more mainstream with this bird for no particular reason. I called him Melvin. or Mel from Hell. That's how my birds got their names. Thanks a lot.